Good afternoon, Christian Church in Tennessee. Today I give thanks to God, our Creator, for the opportunity to enter your lives virtually. I know that the last 2 weeks have been filled with frustration, fear, criticism, sadness, anger, and the need for us to keep moving ahead. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today. Because I wanted to tell you something that maybe you don't know. In 2009, I wrote a 500-page dissertation on a model for improving racial understanding in the church. And I opened the analysis of that dissertation with these three powerful statements. The first one was racism is a sin. It keeps us separated from God and from one another. The second one was racism is a spiritual, theological, and moral dilemma that must be dealt with, and it must be dealt with by us. It must be eradicated. And the third was racism is our country's biggest embarrassment and disappointment. And then I went on to trace the history and the current temperature of racism. And then I ended by giving some of my future thoughts. And so today, 11 years later, I know that African Americans in our country are tired of 401 years of dehumanization, degradation, and civil unrest. I know that currently our young people of diverse and varied backgrounds are marching, protesting, and demanding that Black lives matter. They're not saying that all lives don't matter, but they are making a powerful statement that's saying today the degradation and the humiliation and the level of racism on the necks of Black people, it matters. And I applaud them for that. Friends, a movement has begun. And church, let me tell you that within this movement, we will not go back. Scripture admonishes us to leave a legacy for our children's children. And I want to ask you, Christian Church in Tennessee, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What kind will you leave? Will you leave a legacy that says, I fought hard for all of God's children to have a seat at the table? No matter what color, what background, what socioeconomic side of town they live on, I fought desperately for all of God's children to find freedom in these United States and beyond. I truly believe, church, that we have the power to show the world, this country, what needs to be done to live in peace and freedom. In that dissertation, I wrote about the importance of the table. Because we as disciples, we center our theology around the table. We're saying that all are welcome to the table as Christ welcomes us. And we do this faithfully every time we gather. But in that dissertation, and even today in my mind, 11 years later, I had one pivotal question. And that question centered around, well, after we leave the communion table and we walk out of the doors and we go back to our normal lives, what about the lunchroom table? What about the boardroom table? Are all welcome to those tables? In our mission statement within the Christian Church in Tennessee, we say that we are like an open table where all God's children are welcome. And at this open table, all of God's children can recognize and know the unmistakable grace of God. And so I want to challenge you today and beyond to think about how God is calling the Christian Church in Tennessee to do what must be done in order for all of God's children to understand and to recognize and to make no mistake that they are welcome to God's table. In the book of Esther, we find Esther in deep conversation with her cousin Mordecai. And they're talking about what is happening to Esther's people. And there was one thing that Esther did. She called for a fast. And after she had her whole household, her maidens fast, she determined that she needed to go see the king. And no queen had ever darkened the steps of the king without being summoned. And Esther's words were, if I perish, let me perish. I'm going to see the king. I'm going to take a chance, because if I don't, we'll all perish. And what I love about that Esther story, she took a chance and she went to see the king. And Esther defended her people. And so I'm saying to us, Christian Church in Tennessee, that this spiritual and theological dilemma that we continue to find ourselves fighting even 401 years later does not leave any of us unscathed. Racism has the power and the ability to destroy us all. Not one will be saved. And so I'm coming to you today to say, as your regional minister and president, that God is calling us. God is calling us awake out of our slumber. God is calling us varied colors to come together, to be in conversation, to eradicate racism. The Christian Church in Tennessee will be having a series of conversations and other actions sponsored by our regional pro-reconciliation team to ensure we are complicit not only with God, but that we're standing and we're working for the sake of the gospel. Last week was a very pivotal week in our country. We continue to be called to come together. Come together right now over love. Come together right now over what it means for all of us to be saved. To come together right now what it means to have all persons experience freedom. Come together right now. That is our call. And so our general minister and president last week released a powerful statement. And at the end of that statement, she invited folks to sign up if they were going to be with her in this pro-reconciling effort. I want to invite the Christian Church in Tennessee to do the same thing. If you're going to be with us in this moment and movement of pro-reconciling anti-racist work so that we all may come together, I would love for you to drop me an email. Love for you to just drop us a line that says, I'm in. We can't do this work without you. Be clear that we will never be the same again. What we must do is open up our eyes and our minds and ask God to help lead us and guide us as we have the critical conversations needed to restore and to repair the breach and this ugly sin of racism. I love you all. I'm happy to be your regional minister, and I look forward to your emails. God bless you and take care.